This is the most disturbing truth about Rome's most monstrous emperor. What really happened behind palace walls will shock you to your core. Historians have tried to bury these dark secrets for centuries, but today, we're exposing everything. You won't believe what this tyrant did to his own family, and why Rome never recovered. Watch until the end. The final revelation will leave you speechless. Born in 12 AD into the high echelons of Roman nobility, Caligula was the son of Germanicus, a beloved general with the loyalty of the people, and Agrippina the Elder, a fierce and powerful noblewoman. The weight of expectation settled on the boy early, but so too did the trauma. When Germanicus died under suspicious circumstances, whispers of poisoning echoing through the Senate halls, the child's world shattered. His mother was soon imprisoned, and his brothers executed under the paranoid gaze of Emperor Tiberius. The young Caligula, exiled to the island fortress of Capri, found himself both spared and scarred. What emerged from that island was not the promise of Rome's future, but a ticking time bomb of pain, rage, and unquenched ambition. In 37 AD, at the age of just 24, Caligula assumed the throne. For a fleeting moment, he was hailed as a savior. Rome rejoiced. After the cold dread of Tiberius' reign, the new emperor seemed to breathe youth and life into the imperial halls. But the promise dissolved with chilling speed. Barely months into his rule, Rome began to see glimpses of something far darker. The cheerful facade began to crack. Lavish festivals gave way to slaughter. Generosity turned to bloodshed. Caligula didn't purge for political consolidation. He eliminated because he could. The tales recorded by Suetonius and Dio Cassius read like horror. Caligula, in his growing delusions of grandeur, did not merely execute rivals. He murdered allies, friends, guests at his own banquets. A senator was executed for refusing to lend the emperor a horse. Entire families were put to death, their crimes forgotten beneath the spectacle of imperial wrath. At one gathering, Caligula reportedly forced grieving parents to witness the execution of their own sons. No strategy justified these cruelties. They were performed as theater, twisted performances choreographed to assert one message. Terror was the emperor's favorite weapon. He turned the imperial palace into a macabre playground. His feasts became nightmares. Slaves were maltreated for amusement. Knights were humiliated or unalived for sport. And at the center of it all stood Caligula, laughing, mocking, ordering life and death with the flip of a hand. Rome had known tyrants, but this was something more primal, something grotesque. This was a ruler who didn't merely want obedience. He demanded agony. The historian Tacitus described his behavior not as that of a despot, but as a sadist. His power was not anchored in politics. It was fed by fear and sustained by spectacle. Even his own family wasn't spared. Suspicion became a death sentence. Caligula ordered the deaths of his grandmother Antonia and his cousin Tiberius Gemellus. The latter starved slowly in a calculated, cruel erasure. His siblings were not safe either. But perhaps most disturbing of all was his obsession with his sister Drusilla. Whispers of incest swirled through Rome's elite. When she died prematurely, Caligula lost what remained of his grip. He declared her a goddess, erected temples in her name, and demanded that senators worship her. The line between grief and megalomania blurred into a delusion from which there was no return. He no longer considered himself mortal. Caligula began to refer to himself as a living god. He demanded that his likeness be worshipped in temples dedicated to Jupiter. His ego consumed tradition, mockery became law. He famously declared that his horse, Incitatus, would be made a consul, a grotesque parody of Rome's sacred political office. Whether this actually occurred or was exaggerated by historians is debated, but the symbolism remains. Caligula didn't just abuse power, he desecrated it. He stripped Rome's institutions of dignity and replaced them with a farce soaked in blood. The Senate became a stage for his abuse. Senators were insulted, struck, even executed in public. Rome's greatest statesmen lived in fear. One nobleman, Cornelius Lentulus, was ordered to choose his own method of death, poison or blade. After surviving poison, Lentulus was hacked down by soldiers. These weren't merely executions. They were psychological maltreatment designed to break spirits and prove that even death itself was Caligula's toy. Madness cloaked itself in ritual. Religion was not exempt. Caligula inserted himself into sacred rites, demanded divine honors, and rewrote spiritual tradition to place himself at the center. Even as the empire strained under economic pressure, its coffers drained by insane expenditures on circuses and palaces, Caligula's grip only tightened. Starvation crept across provinces, while the emperor built floating palaces and bathed in perfumes made from crushed pearls. He lived not as a god, but as a demon drunk on his own omnipotence. Courtiers were praised in the morning and executed by nightfall. Children were taken from noble families, and they were eliminated simply to amuse the emperor. One chilling report describes Caligula forcing an accused man to repeat his own execution sentence as a theatrical soliloquy before being torn apart. This was no longer governance, it was a reign of calculated terror. By the third year, fear ruled Rome more effectively than any legion. The city, once heart of a mighty republic, now bowed in horror. Yet as Caligula's madness deepened, so too did the resolve of those who wished to see him fall. Among the Praetorian Guard, his own protectors, a conspiracy fermented. These men, hardened soldiers who had once knelt before him, began to whisper of rebellion. On January 24, 41 AD, the whispers turned to steel. In a narrow corridor outside the theater, Caligula was ambushed. He didn't die quickly. The guards, led by Cassius Chaerea, maltreated him dozens of times. The man who had spilled rivers of blood now drowned in his own. A fitting end to an emperor who had mutilated Rome itself. But the revenge was not yet complete. His wife Caesonia and his young daughter were also slain, wiped from existence. In the chaos, Claudius, Caligula's uncle, was discovered hiding behind a curtain. Shaking, terrified, and never intended for power, he was dragged from the shadows and declared emperor. Rome, desperate for any relief from madness, embraced the weak as their new savior. The nightmare was over, or at least it had a face now, a name, Caligula. Historians pieced together his life from the accounts of Suetonius, Tacitus, and Dio Cassius, each writing with agendas, each battling rumor and exaggeration. Yet beneath their biases lies a consistent truth. Caligula was not merely a tyrant. He was a psychological anomaly, a man whose childhood traumas metastasized into imperial carnage. Modern psychiatry has attempted to label him schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, encephalitis, or even a brain tumor. But no diagnosis can fully explain the cruelty. His murders bore the signature of obsession, not policy. The thrill of control, the craving for dominance, the pleasure in pain. All hallmarks not of a ruler, but of a serial life-taker. Unlike conquerors who unalived for power, Caligula unalived for reaction, for spectacle. He was not defending an empire, he was playing God. And every scream, every execution, every family shattered beneath his rule was part of his divine theater. Rome was not ruled by man or beast, but by a phantom of reason, a phantom that wore a crown. Centuries later, his name still conjures dread. The word Caligula is not remembered as a footnote in Caesar's lineage, but as a warning etched into history's darkest chapters. He reminds us that beneath the polished marble of civilization, madness can fester, that sometimes the greatest terror is not the fall of empires, but what empires will endure when madness takes the throne. Was Caligula a victim of trauma or the embodiment of evil? Do you think his reign was exaggerated by biased historians, or was the truth even worse than the records say? Could someone like him rise again in today's world? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. And if you want more chilling stories from the darkest corners of history, subscribe now.